I'm Emily Chang, and this is the Best of Bloomberg Technology, where we bring you all our top interviews from the week in tech. Coming up, One Voice, why Amazon would consider teaming up with more of the competition to improve its voice-activated virtual assistant. We will speak exclusively with the vice president of Alexa. Plus, a wide-ranging interview with the former CEO of Microsoft and LA Clippers owner Steve Ballmer. His thoughts on Twitter, Trump, immigration, and Satya Nadella's overhaul of the culture he left behind. And we'll hear from the CEO of Starbucks on how the company adapts in the age of technology. This week, we took Bloomberg Technology to Seattle for the GeekWire Summit to see how the city has transformed into a tech hub and a center of innovation. We spent time with the biggest names in the region, including Amazon, Microsoft, and Starbucks. Let's kick it off now with my exclusive interview with Amazon Vice President of Alexa and Echo Devices, Tony Reed. She told us that Amazon wouldn't rule out partnerships with major rivals like Apple and Google if that means improving its voice-activated technology.
I am most focused on trying to reduce friction for customers and drive towards what we call our customer experience North Star. And really the idea there is that Alexa is more human-like. So it's conversational. We can shorten the path from where the customer's starting and where they want to be with less and less work on their part.
So is Alexa going to be responding with the uh-hs like the SNL skit?
Maybe. That's sort of I joke that is completely what another human would do if someone was telling a very long story. And
so, how much further can you go when it comes to just understanding natural human language, whether it's, an adult talking or a child talking, or are we there when it comes to how much improvement can be made?
Oh, we're definitely not there. It's day one, super early stages. I mean, we like to say we're at the tipping point of machine learning and artificial intelligence. And so I think we'll see a lot of improvement over the next few years even.
How so?
I just think the technology is there, and having ourselves included, but developers being able to build features in a cloud that's sitting on top of AWS allows for a lot of compute power. And I think that you'll just see a ton of innovation out of that.
So what's missing from Alexa?
What's missing? I think part of it is that kind of North Star human, sort of conversational behavior. Alexa and the skills that we have today are great at reducing friction and making the customer experience very delightful. But we still have a long ways to go to make it an even more robust experience.
You recently partnered with one of your biggest rivals, Microsoft and Cortana. What do you see customers using Cortana that they might not get on Alexa? Is it Office? Is it calendaring? Is it email?
Yeah, definitely. It's in the space of productivity. I'm actually really excited to see this launch because I think for us, we see this world in which there will be multiple AIs. You'll have AIs who are experts in certain domains and bring another unique set of data. It's kind of like the internet in a way. And so customers will be able to search out experts in a space, and then you'll probably have a broad set of AIs who sort of, can handle the breadth.
Will we see you partnering with other rivals like Google, like Apple with the HomePod coming in December?
Why not?
How do you make those calculations?
For us, it's very customer focused. We operate, Amazon has for years, and it's served us well, but we are super passionate about the customer first approach, and we work backwards from that. So if we believe it will benefit customers and improve the experience, we'll work towards it.
Is the vision for Alexa sort of the center of a whole network of home devices, or is it the home device in the home?
Well, we see Alexa as being this ambient, experience in the home, and customers can invoke this experience wherever they are. We also see that going outside of the home. We've announced partnerships with automobile manufacturers, so Alexa will be embedded in some of the cars. BMW is one of them. We have a partnership with the Wen, so then when you're traveling for business and you're checking into a hotel, you'll you can experience Alexa there. So we see that going beyond the home as well.
Do you see home security potentially as an area of interest?
Potentially.
And then going beyond the home, what do you mean by that?
More like the auto space is an example, or hotel rooms.
Obviously, Amazon and Alexa got a huge jump on this market, but now the competitors are there. What are you doing to stay ahead? Like, is there anything that you see your rivals doing that is impressive? You're going, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I'm impressed with a lot of the innovation that's happening in this space. We are super focused on building new features and skills for our customers. We stay very focused on that, and we think in the end customers will win.
That was Vice President of Alexa and Echo Devices, Tony Reed. Still with Amazon, the head of the company's hugely profitable web services division says the shift to the cloud is just beginning. Sales at the AWS unit surged 42% last quarter to more than $4 billion. I spoke exclusively with Amazon Web Services CEO Andy Jassy and asked if Amazon's explosion in the cloud has surpassed even his wildest expectations.
Well, it's certainly growing really fast, and I don't think any of us would have had the audacity to predict it would grow as fast as it has. But I think we always believed it had the chance to be a really significant business, and that's because just inside of Amazon, which is a really strong technology company, we had a lot of internal development teams that wanted help moving faster, more cost effectively, and building their applications on top of an infrastructure technology platform. And so the fact that Amazon really wanted this made us think that third parties would really want it. And then, of course, I don't think we would have predicted that it would be a $15 billion revenue run rate business growing a little bit over 40% year over year this quickly, and that I don't think we would have predicted that we would have several times the size business of the next 14 providers combined, or that we'd have millions of active customers, or that we'd have a 6 to 7 year head start. So all those things were big surprises to us.
Of course, your competitors now want this too. How do you make sure Amazon stays in the leading position?
Well, I think there's a few things. I mean, it's not a surprise to us that every large technology company in the world is interested in building a replica of what AWS has done. It's such a great value proposition for customers that it's why it's being adopted so fast, so others will want to participate. I think that there are some real differences between the platforms today. I think the first thing is that AWS just has a lot more functionality by a large amount than anybody else, and we're also iterating at a faster clip, so that gap and capability continues to extend. And I think there are really different ecosystems around these platforms. It's not just the thousands of systems integrators who've built practices around AWS, but most ISVs or SaaS providers will adapt their software to work on one technology infrastructure platform. Some will do two. Very few will have the time to do three. And they all start with AWS just because we have such a significant market segment leadership position. And then I think the maturity of the platforms are also in really different places. We have this expression we use internally that there's no compression algorithm for experience. And that's because you just can't learn certain lessons until you get to different elbows of the curve and scale. And with several times the size business of the next 14 providers combined, they just haven't learned those lessons yet. And so you see that in all kinds of manifestations of performance.
You just added GE as a customer. Same time, you lost Spotify to Google, Bank of America to Microsoft. Tell us about the lengths that you're going to not just get new customers, but make sure you keep the customers that you have.
Yeah, we have millions of active customers, and the way to think about an active customer for AWS is it's a non-Amazon entity that's used our platform in the last 30 days. So we have millions of active customers, and they span the gamut. So, most of the big successful startups have built their businesses completely from scratch on top of AWS, and these are companies like Pinterest and Airbnb and Slack and Domo and Robinhood. But over the last 3 years, the enterprise and public sector adoption has really dramatically increased in the cloud and in AWS. And you see every meaningful vertical business segment using AWS, whether if you're talking about oil and gas, it's Shell and BP and Hess. In financial services, it's Capital One, Intuit, Commonwealth Bank of Australia, and FINRA. In manufacturing, GE, you mentioned, they've been actually working with AWS for a long time. They're moving 9,000 applications to AWS. And Schneider Electric and Philips and technology, Netflix runs completely everything on top of AWS, even though we compete with them in our video business. And then in the public sector, we have nearly 3,000 government agencies worldwide using AWS. So we just have a lot more customers in every imaginable segment than you'll find elsewhere.
That That was CEO of Amazon Web Services, Andy Jassy. Coming up, plenty more of our coverage from the GeekWire Summit in Seattle, including our exclusive conversation with Microsoft President Brad Smith. Next, this is Bloomberg. Qualcomm was fined a record $773 million by Taiwan's Fair Trade Commission this week. It was accused of violating antitrust rules for at least 7 years and collecting licensing fees from local companies during that time. Qualcomm disagrees with the decision and intends to appeal. More now from our coverage from the GeekWire Summit in Seattle and to the tech giant opposite Amazon in Washington State, Microsoft. I sat down with President Brad Smith to talk about the company's impact on Seattle and started by asking about Microsoft's reaction to President Trump's stance on issues like immigration. Also with me, Ed Lazowska, longtime computer science professor at the University of Washington.
DACA is an issue that we believe is important for the country and important for our business. As an industry, we critically depend on having the best and brightest, and many of the best and brightest are among these 800,000 people who are registered under DACA. And what we said was if the government seeks to deport our employees, any of the 44 Microsoft employees who are DACA registrants, we're not going to sit on our hands and just watch. We will pay for them to have legal counsel. We'll file a brief as an amicus. We'll seek to intervene in court. We will be by their side. We want our employees to know that we have their back.
Look, Microsoft has a history of challenging the administration where you believe it's warranted. What are your main concerns with the Trump administration?
Well, the truth is we have a history of working with and challenging basically every administration. We sued the executive branch 4 times when President Obama was heading it during 2017. In part, we're continuing some of the debates that started in the last administration around national security and privacy, the protection of customers. But certainly immigration is a new and bigger and more challenging issue this year. We stepped forward in the wake of the travel ban. We've stepped forward again in the context of DACA. We believe we need an immigration system that's enforced. It needs to be balanced, but we need to recognize that as a country, we absolutely benefit. All of us in this country. It doesn't matter who we are, where we live, or what we do. We all benefit when some of the best and brightest people in the world come and work by our side.
Are you worried about retaliation from the federal government or any sort of blowback? I mean, have they come to you and said, what are you doing?
Well, the good news from our perspective is if we're principled, we explain things clearly, we never make things personal. We stood up strongly for DACA. And I went to a Virginia school with Ivanka Trump to stand up for computer science. Our view is simple. We will partner wherever we can, and we'll stand apart whenever we should.
Ed, what are your thoughts?
I have nothing to add. Brad said it perfectly. This is a really important issue, and Microsoft and Brad are extremely principled, and you see it in all their actions.
So, we were talking about fake news earlier in the show, Facebook, Google, Twitter being called before Congress about these paid for by Russia ads. Have you been looking at Microsoft, at whether Russia had any involvement, did the same thing on any of Microsoft's platforms?
We are looking.
Yeah.
We're looking now. We've been looking the last few days. We haven't found anything yet. I think we actually need to think about 2 things. One is what happened in 2016. How can we learn from it? It doesn't matter whether you're Twitter, Facebook, or anybody else. The more we learn, the better we will be. But the question I believe we need to really focus on as a tech sector and a country is not what happened in 2016. How do we prepare for 2018? How do we prepare around the world? There will be a new prime minister elected or one re-elected in Canada in 2019. There will be a presidential race here in the United States in 2020. Let's assume that people are unfortunately going to get more sophisticated in trying to abuse these social media platforms. They're going to get more sophisticated in these cyber attacks on political candidates. How do we get better as a tech sector? How do we work more closely with the government? How do we ask the governments of the world, of the democratic countries of the world, to use their voice together to say, this is an attack on democracy and it needs to stop?
Do you think, Ed, that we can trust companies like Microsoft to self-police, to take on these issues?
Brad is the lawyer. I think we're going to need some congressional action here.
And I would agree with that. We need to accept once again that as an industry, we have a very high responsibility. We might even have the first responsibility. But it would be a great mistake to think that these fundamental, frankly, illegal acts under international law are something that the tech sector can defeat by itself. It would be like looking out in the streets and seeing people looting and just asking the store owners to put better locks on their stores. We need the governments of the world to rally. This is an attack on democracy, on the democratic infrastructure of our country. The government needs to come together, and the governments of the world need to come together.
Look, Ed suggested earlier that perhaps these tech companies were willfully ignorant in this regard. Do you think so?
I don't think so. I actually don't. I mean, it's the truth is these platforms are large. There are so many people using them. So many different kinds of ads are being purchased that I don't think that it occurred to anybody in the tech sector or anybody in government or anybody in the media last year to ask, are there people from a foreign government buying ads? If it didn't occur to anybody at Bloomberg, I'll bet it didn't occur to us either.
Well, they do say that they started looking into it in June, which was several months before the election. But, they didn't understand, obviously, at that point, the scale. At least that's what they said.
It's a bit like looking for a needle in a haystack. Because if you look at all the ads that get purchased on all of the social media sites, it's quite a big haystack. And of course, you're going to get better at finding needles once you figure out what they look like, where to look for them. And I think we're starting as an industry to discern that. And I'll be the first to keep saying, and we need to do more, we need to get better, we need to look ahead because the attacks are going to get more sophisticated. And yet I'll also say, let's not assume that government should do nothing here.
Europe is looking at greater regulation. It could be coming in the United States. Are you concerned about more regulation coming to tech companies? Are you bracing yourself?
I worry less about more regulation and worry more about less thoughtful regulation.
Okay.
I think that there is a place in the world for good regulation. The whole industry is extraordinarily focused on May 25th, 2018. That's the date next year in Europe when the so-called General Data Protection Regulation takes effect. We'll have much stronger privacy protection. I think that's good for people around the world. Anytime it's good for people around the world, it's not bad for tech. It gives us more legal clarity. If we can get good regulations, we'll figure out how to manage them.
Ed, I know you have a question.
I was going to turn us to Seattle for a minute.
Yes.
Be a little parochial.
Yes.
When I moved here, Microsoft was 12 people in Albuquerque. There wasn't a lot of technology here. Times have changed. Baidu yesterday became the 100th company headquartered elsewhere to open an engineering center in the Seattle area in Bellevue. Baidu has 2 ex-Microsofties in leading positions. You've obviously played a role in encouraging to be here. Talk about co-opetition.
Well, I think Seattle is sort of, as we like to joke, the cloud capital of the world. It's definitely cloudy in the weather, but it really, between Amazon and Microsoft and all of these other companies, you're going to find an incredibly fervent engineering environment with lots of creativity. And I think we all benefit as this community grows in the right sort of ways. And as you mentioned, Ed, I was happy to encourage the folks at Baidu. We have a great relationship with them at Microsoft that in part is based on personal relationships and in part goes beyond that. And I think that as the world comes to Seattle, we will have new opportunities to hopefully play a leadership role in the world and create new benefits for the people who grew up here, too.
And yet Amazon is your biggest rival, so to speak, and especially in the cloud, of all places.
Well, and that's great. I mean, we are in an incredibly competitive industry.
Yep.
And the truth is, we have some of the best competitors in the world. I mean, if you want to look at competitors that are doing great work, all you got to do is look at Amazon and Google and Facebook and Apple. But we also work with each other, apropos your point about co-opetition. We need to collaborate in addressing problems like cybersecurity attacks and the like. And at the end of the day, if more people have confidence in the cloud, if we can move the frontier of artificial intelligence forward, this is a big world. There's room for all of us to be successful.
Last question. You may disagree with the administration on a number of social issues, but on tax reform, you may be more in line. What are your thoughts on progressive tax reform?
Well, I think we need tax reform. We've needed tax reform for a couple of decades now. It's really overdue. Perhaps as much as anything, as an international company, we want to see a so-called territorial system, which is what the rest of the world has. Let's get rid of the system we have today that creates these incentives for us and others to keep profits offshore. Let's figure out how to get money back in the United States. Let's put it to work here in the United States. And let's bring our tax system into the 21st century.
That was Brad Smith, Microsoft president, and Ed Lazowska, University of Washington professor. Coming up, the president of Chinese search engine Baidu gives us his take on censorship in China and his views on President Trump's stance on trade. That is next. This is Bloomberg. Chinese web search giant Baidu is expanding its presence in the U.S. by opening a new base in Seattle as part of its drive to further develop AI technology. I spoke with Baidu President Yaqing Zhang in an exclusive interview where we discussed his thoughts on President Trump and censorship in China.
If you look at the trajectory, the overall direction, right, China is becoming more open than ever before. And technology industry is growing phenomenally.
Is that the case, though? I mean, when I was in China, Facebook and Twitter were allowed, Google was allowed, and then they all got shut down.
Yeah, one thing is obviously there's a lot of momentum in China for the internet industry, but also it's hugely competitive. Look at the search space we are. There are more search companies in China than U.S. U.S. you have Google and Bing. In China, BATs, Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent all have search technology, search business. And then you have probably half a dozen other companies doing search. And every day there are new technologies that compete with us in search. And the whole competition is scorching, it's fierce, it's intense. But I think it's a good thing. It makes us more constructive, innovative. And the Bing is also in China, by the way.
How would you characterize the health of the Chinese economy, particularly the pileup of debt? Do you see a big risk there?
Yeah. Well, overall, Chinese economy is very resilient, and the 6.9% growth in the GDP on such a big, large base, it's amazing. So overall, I don't see a systematic risk. There might be things here or there need to fix. But overall, I'm very confident. I'm not an economist, but for the industry I am in, for the people I talk with, overall, it seems quite healthy.
Are you concerned at all about President Trump cracking down on free trade and cracking down on the relationship with China?
That's really bad. If that happens, America benefits from openness, from talent flow. Any form of protectionism will be bad for U.S. and the world.
That was Baidu President Yaqing Zhang. Coming up, Steve Ballmer speaks out. Our exclusive interview with the LA Clippers owner and former Microsoft CEO. His take on tax reform, immigration, and the notion of fake news next. And a reminder, all episodes of Bloomberg Technology are live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV, weekdays 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to the best of Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Sheryl Sandberg spoke out this week for the first time since reports emerged that Russian actors purchased ads on Facebook to target voters during the 2016 election. The COO admitted that the platform should apologize to the American people, but more importantly was determined to fight what she described as a new kind of threat and cooperate with investigators.
We're going to give them the material they want. And we said that yesterday. And we want to give them the material. We want the full picture to be understood. We don't want this kind of foreign interference, and none of us should want this kind of foreign interference. And in order to prevent it, we're all going to have to fully cooperate.
Facebook has already turned over more than 3,000 ads to House and Senate committees. Well, Twitter will join Facebook and Google at a hearing on Capitol Hill next month. Twitter shareholder and former Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer says tech companies can't do more at present to police the spread of fake news. I sat down with the LA Clippers owner in Seattle and spoke with him about the government data website called USA Facts he released earlier this year. Take a listen.
We launched our platform with data from the government about the government. No fake news, no alternate facts. We launched on tax day. We keep adding more data and we keep the information current. But the real thing we're doing now at usafacts.org, in case somebody wants to check, is we're trying to help citizens really run through topics of the day. So we have a walkthrough up there right now that'll walk you through the president's budget in the context of what has happened historically. What does GDP look like? What has tax revenue looked like? What's the deficit look like? And how does all of that compare to the CBO? We make no predictions. We're going to make sure people can walk through and look at these government proposals in the context of the past. That's all that's factual, and then be able to say, does this make sense to me or not? We have a little video that goes along with it that'll explain to citizens, this is kind of the set of data and the way to think about, by the numbers, how do you think about something like the budget proposal?
You say it's just the facts, and I know you now know these facts better than almost anyone, as our lawmakers, as the president, as they talk about tax reform and health care. Do you have any advice? Yeah, in a way I do. These things are holistic issues. It's sort of funny to me. We look at tax reform, we look at the budget, and we look at health care. And yet when you really look at the economics of these three things, they're linked just like this. I mean, what does it mean to have a budget without tax reform? It's our process. I'm not condemning anybody, but it's kind of nutty. You have to have a tax plan in order to have a budget. Be like a company having an expense plan without a revenue plan. It just doesn't make sense. And then one of the biggest pieces of expenses, that's healthcare. And you don't have a healthcare. I mean, how do these things, so really understanding how these things mesh together would be a key piece of advice I would certainly give decision makers, legislators, and the executive branch. You mentioned this is an age of misinformation, of fake news. How big a problem is that? And what's the responsibility of these platforms, Facebook, Google, Twitter?
I think this notion of people being able to sort of be fed whatever's going to make them feel good, because that's what people are really doing. People want to feed whatever the instincts are. And I think that the goal has to be to say, this is how it looks. You can see it any way you want to, but someplace you have to come and be able to take a look at stuff objectively. I'm not sure you could say that's Facebook's job. They're not in the news business. They pass along other people's news. Same thing with Google. That's part of the issue here, is things can look authentic. We did a USA Facts poll, and when surveyed, people will say, I find my information most often on social media, and I trust it the least.
So do you think Facebook and Google and Twitter should be policing this more, or that's not their job?
They can't. It's not in the nature of what's going on. I do think over time there needs to be something that's the equivalent of a authenticated user on Twitter, where you get the little bullet that says you really are who you say you are. I think it'd be nice to have authenticated sources, so that people can say, I really want to see not just what the crowd is saying, but I want to hear from some authentic sources.
What if that information isn't coming from the crowd, if it's coming from our own president? Is it a problem if he's the one spreading misinformation?
Well, we elected the president, our country as a whole. He is our president in chief. And I know there's people who have problems with that and people who are supportive of that. But at least when the president speaks, he's speaking authentically for himself. And in a sense, that is a set of facts. When a major policy leader speaks, you could say it's true, it's not, you like what he says, you don't like what he says, but it's what he's thinking. And every voter probably benefits by having the ability to hear directly, just as we hear directly from other people. I get a chance to speak directly on the internet. LeBron James gets a chance to speak directly on the internet. Not everybody wants to hear what people say to one another. They don't always agree. Certainly we've seen that with LeBron and and the president.
There are some who say the president is taking it to another level, perhaps even inciting nuclear war on Twitter. Should he be kicked off Twitter? Should he be allowed to make these statements on Twitter?
Everybody has the right to speak for themselves. And that includes the President of the United States. Everybody has the right to speak for themselves. That's kind of in the fundamental nature of this country, and I think it's an important one. I think the citizens have an obligation to elect the people who they think will best represent their interests. And that gets a chance to get battle tested every 2 years, every 4 years. And I love our system because people have to constantly prove themselves. And if people are doing things that are not valued, that'll come across. And if people are doing things that are valued. Now, the way our system works, it doesn't take 100% to win. It takes logically 51%, of course, with the Electoral College. That's not really what it is. But it takes logically 51% to win. And people have a right to hear directly as they go cast their ballots.
You ran Microsoft for many years. You dealt with issues like immigration. Do you have any concerns about the stance the president is taking on things like DACA, for example?
I think immigration is a super important thing. My dad was an immigrant. My grandparents on the other side were immigrants. I value the fact that immigrants come into this country. I think it is hugely, hugely important. It's not something that was just important 100 years ago. It remains important. It remains important in terms of high-tech workers coming into the country. It remains important in terms of people moving back and forth across our southern border. And there are complicated issues. There are issues of national security, but there are also issues of economy and fundamental humanity. And I do think it's important to look at all of those things, including humanity, as we kind of address the plight of the so-called DACA.
During our lengthy and wide-ranging conversation, I also asked how he dealt with Satya Nadella taking over as CEO of Microsoft in 2014. Take a listen to that.
I think his book was actually pretty good about that. He recognizes the good. He recognizes the things that needed to be changed. I think he's navigated that very, very well. And from my perspective, we knew we needed to get into the cloud. I got that started. He's really taken it to another level, and I respect the fact that he's had to do things differently. I knew things would have to be done differently in that area. That's part of the reason it was a good time for a change, if you will. Hardware is a whole different deal. He's pushed that along with Xbox and Surface, and I kind of respect that needed things done differently. And over time, things need to be shaken up and freshened. And like I had been at Microsoft the whole time, it reflected my personality and Bill's personality. But kind of like children, things need to keep growing, if you will. And we revel when our children are grown up and are sort of making their own way. And I revel that Satya's taking Microsoft to its next level, sort of going forth in new and in different ways.
So Azure is still moving along, but Amazon Web Services still much bigger and growing faster. I mean, do you want more, better, faster from Satya in the cloud?
Sure. I do, absolutely. And as an investor on our quarterly call, I say, come on, let's keep it moving, let's keep it moving, let's keep it moving.
Are you listening into all the calls?
No, I don't listen. And I, like any other large investor, I do a quarterly call with Amy Hood, who's the CFO. And I think Microsoft's really done a pretty phenomenal job, particularly on the Office side, but also on the Azure side. But is there a lot of room for improvement? Because the market leader on the Azure side is pretty damn big. Yeah, I do think there is. And
what kind of improvement?
You need to have even better attachment and ability to sell to startups and other development companies. The developers. And with Azure, you have to win the developers. And I think Microsoft's getting there, but still has a lot more to do.
You've said you're done being an investor. Is that still the case?
Yeah, I'm not making, quote, new investments, unquote.
So just mutual funds and Microsoft and Twitter, that's it?
Index funds. Keep it simple. Have everything pegged to the market. I have some bonds. I have Microsoft. I have Twitter. And then I have a couple of small private things that I don't do much of, but I have a basketball-based investment. I have one investment with a couple investments with friends. That's it.
There's this big debate about the future of AI and whether it's dangerous or not. Elon Musk thinks robots could take over the world. They could supersede the human race. Mark Zuckerberg has said that's irresponsible to talk like that. What do you think?
Oh, I think that's the usual, what shall I say, effervescence of the tech community. Oh, let's say something extreme. Oh, let's tune it down. Oh. I mean, when you get right down to it, is AI very important? Yes. Will it improve the way people live? Yes. Do we know all of what we will accomplish today? No. But getting computers to be smarter at helping people do what they want to do every day, that part can't get bad. I'm sure there's a place in time where we can speculate about all of the tough societal issues, but we're years away from that. So Elon Musk, of course, what he says in the long run could be right, but the long run could be a long, long run. Not going to happen in the next 10 years or so. And of course, Zuckerberg's ready to and prepared and, sort of right to talk about that. But right now, you can put some of that clutter out of your mind. This artificial intelligence stuff will make a big difference.
So you think it's possible that the human race could become extinct and
no,
robots
the human race isn't going to become extinct. But how powerful will be computers' ability to reason, and what will that fully mean? We don't know. But we're not going to deal with that problem for 20 years.
That was Steve Ballmer, LA Clippers owner and former CEO of Microsoft. Well, billionaire Richard Branson has joined the board of the soon-to-be renamed Virgin Hyperloop One. Virgin aims to raise $200 million for the futuristic transportation that Elon Musk first theorized in 2013. After visiting the test site, Branson is convinced the, quote, groundbreaking technology will dramatically change travel. And coming up, yet another exclusive interview from Seattle, this time the CEO of Starbucks, Kevin Johnson. We'll find out where the coffee giant sees its biggest market for growth. This is Bloomberg. Apple CEO Tim Cook met with French President Emmanuel Macron in Paris this week. The meeting came amid calls by France and other European nations for an aggressive overhaul of how tech companies pay taxes. Just last week, Amazon was slapped with an order to pay $294 million plus interest in back taxes to Luxembourg. More now from our coverage of the GeekWire Summit in Seattle. The city is known, of course, for its coffee, and Starbucks reigns supreme after opening its first store there 46 years ago. I caught up with Starbucks CEO Kevin Johnson, and I started by asking about the difference between his leadership style and that of his predecessor and company founder, Howard Schultz.
Howard is an iconic merchant and founder, and so in many ways he's got years of intuition, and so I would characterize Howard. He is a much more spontaneous, intuitive sort of leader. With my background in tech and digital, I'm much more thinking about using data to help inform me of decisions and being more intentional about what we do. But at the end of the day, we've worked together for a long time. I value his creativity. I value his point of view, and I think I bring some unique things to the table that are going to help us as a company as we make this transition into the future.
I interviewed you in your prior life as a tech company CEO at Juniper.
Many years ago.
How is the tech company guy going to change the coffee company?
Well, first of all, the coffee, the tech industry and the coffee industry certainly have two different business models, but they have a lot in common. Both tech industry and coffee, we have to innovate to stay relevant in our sectors. And
what does that mean?
Well, if you think about Starbucks innovation, we have innovation that starts with all things coffee. If you go to our roastery up the street here and you have a chance to experience some of the new coffees, whether it is draft nitro cold brew or whiskey barrel aged coffee, we innovate around coffee. We innovate in our store design. We innovate in our digital mobile connection with our customers. We innovate around our partner benefits, and we innovate around our social impact agenda. So there's 5 major categories of innovation that drive Starbucks.
So how is how I get my coffee going to be different in 1 to 5 years?
Well, certainly as we continue to invest in elevating the experience that we create in our stores around a wide range of beverages, much of that is focusing on the need state of convenience and the need state of connection. I know you're a busy person. A lot of times you're in a hurry. You want to use mobile order and pay, order your coffee, and have it ready when you arrive. Maybe other times you want to go to Starbucks with your family. You want to sit down and share your beverages and have a conversation with people. So we're going to continue to build stores. We're going to continue to elevate that experience, and we're going to continue to bring new beverages and new food items to our stores.
So the app is popular. What do you say to the people who order ahead and then have to wait in line or run into a traffic jam when they get there to pick it up?
Well, we've just implemented new technology in our stores called the Digital Order Manager. So when somebody orders, when their beverage and food is ready, they get a digital notification coming back to them. So we're doing much more to communicate with customers on when their order's ready.
Starbucks has taken a stand on some political and social issues, a plan to hire refugees, for example. You got pushback from conservative shareholders over that. How do you navigate that? And how long do you plan to continue?
Well, Emily, oftentimes people perhaps misinterpret things that we are doing as a political statement. For example, we have an entire pillar of our social impact agenda around opportunity. And that opportunity started with the work that we're doing to hire veterans. You recall we said we would hire 10,000 veterans or spouses. We've exceeded that number. We've upped that commitment to 20,000 by the year 2020. We identified the fact that there's over 6 million young people, ages 16 to 24, who are not in school and not at work. And we started Opportunity Youth, where we now we first committed to hire 40,000 of these young people. We're now hiring 100,000 of them. So the refugee portion is very consistent with that. That was our first global initiative, given the fact that there are refugees in Europe and other countries around the world, that we felt like we could play a role in helping those communities, give those people jobs and opportunities. So in many ways, this is core to who we are, about creating opportunity for people, and it's not about making a political statement.
Do you get any pushback from the board on this? Are they involved?
Well, the board is heavily involved in all this. I mean, and clearly, the things that we do, we work to make sure that they are consistent with our mission. They are not politically driven things that we're trying to do. The fact is we hire military veterans, and they have made our company better. The young people we've hired from Opportunity Youth have been fantastic partners in our stores. They make our company better. So much of this is core to who we are and how we get the talent that we need to create that experience in our stores.
You're also getting some pushback over your paid leave policies, 18 weeks for moms at corporate headquarters, 6 weeks for moms in the stores. How do you reconcile that when the employees on the front line aren't getting the same benefits?
Well, the fact is we offer best-in-class parental leave in our stores compared to anyone else in the industry. And what we do is every year we take feedback from our partners on what's important to them. And so for our partners in the stores, what's been important to them is the increase in wage. And so we've made significant increase in wage for those partners in the store. We've invested over $250 million in wage increase for our partners in the stores, trying to do the right thing for them. But I'd say this is a journey, and we continue to listen to partners and try and do what we believe is right to help them in their unique situation.
And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. You can now listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. Now, cities across the U.S. are ramping up their campaigns to secure the location for Amazon's second headquarters, with initial bids due October 19th. Washington Governor Jay Inslee knows all about what it takes to keep tech firms happy in his state. He spoke to Bloomberg's Karen Weiss about Amazon's search and how Washington lures tech talent to the state.
This is, in a sense, a signal of Amazon's incredible success. I mean, they're growing faster than maybe any other corporation in world history. They're still adding another 6,000 jobs in Seattle, I think, are posted right now with hundreds of thousand square feet. So the growth is going to continue in Washington State, and I think this is a signal of their aspirations and ambitions and growth curve that geography is an issue. So it is not shocking to us that such a rapidly expanding business would be willing to look at some other options, but our state is going to suggest some locations for them, and there's going to be some proposals from a variety of communities around our state in the event that they really do see Washington as a potential option. But one way or another, they're going to grow here in our state. It's a perfect place for them, and I think some proof of that is their success to date. So we're glad they're succeeding.
And when you look at it, kind of their growth here and what's to come, are there advice or things that you would share with other governors as they look to how to manage or how to attract such a large and successful company?
Well, I think we have a strategy for technological growth in our state, which is succeeding not just for Amazon, but with Google and Facebook and Expedia and Microsoft. We have a whole host of companies that have had rapid expansion, and that's the several pillars of our strategy. One is the most important is the development of intellectual talent. We know that the number one recruitment tool is intellectual talent, to make it available and help it grow, and that's why we've been so focused on growing our computer science programs at our university, growing our graduation rate in our schools. And secondly, having an open door, welcoming approach to welcome talent to our community. And this is a kind of a secret sauce that we have welcomed smart people from other states and other countries to be able to help to build these companies. And that has been very attractive to develop the nucleus of an ecosystem, which then continues to build once you hit critical mass of intellectual talent, which we clearly are. And what we've learned is that these companies and industries cross-pollinate. So a computer scientist that might be working in the aerospace industry one year is working in the biomedical industry the next. So we've got that critical mass, and it continues to feed on itself to grow these businesses. Now, we also have some smart approaches about policies. We have a light touch from a regulatory standpoint. It's one of the reasons we have almost 24 companies that are working on autonomous vehicles right now, because we've had a welcoming approach, a regulatory light touch regulatory approach, so these companies can grow their new technologies on this new revolutionary stride forward in our transportation sector. Now, we also have a perfect place to live and enjoy life, and we're now in a recruiting battle, and there's no better place to recruit talent than somebody can come to Washington and ski and sail on the same day and enjoy a beautiful place with clean air and clean water and a very cosmopolitan culture that embraces all kinds of foods and music from around the world. This is a great place to recruit a 23-year-old computer scientist, and that has been one of our secrets of success.
And that does it for this edition of the Best of Bloomberg Technology. We will bring you all the latest in tech throughout the week. Tune in each day, 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. And remember, all episodes of Bloomberg Technology are live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV weekdays. That's all for now. This is Bloomberg.